Good evening, everybody. This is CJ with the GOAT Sports Talk. As we know, the NBA season is going to kick off in a couple of days on Tuesday, the 17th. And, of course, this is what I believe is going to be probably one of the biggest seasons. I think the biggest thing is that everybody hopefully is hoping that there's not going to be, many injuries or anybody out for the season. So we can see the teams at their best performing against each other during the season. There's going to be a lot of exciting matchups. Even across conferences, within divisions, that are going to be, box office games. So hopefully the NBA has their scheduling on point in regards to this season. If they have that on point and they can actually, make sure that they actually are giving us the best games, I think that they will have amazing ratings. And they're starting off the season just right with the doubleheader that they got on Tuesday. That's probably the perfect setup that everybody would probably want to see going into the season, and I believe that the ratings for those games will probably be among the highest, for a season opener in NBA league history. Now, what we're doing here, we're just kind of doing a preview, an NBA preview of the 2017-2018 season. We're going to do everything based on the division. Of course, we know divisions may be gone soon, depending on if they change the playoff format. It may be no need for it, but as of right now, it's still set up. It does involve some aspect of tiebreakers in the event that a team, is tied within the division for a particular spot. They have other ways as well to determine, seeding in the playoffs in each respective conference. But first, we're going to start with the Boston Celtics. Okay, now the Boston Celtics, of course, are clearly on paper the best team in the Atlantic Division. With that said, they should be able to rack up, a ton of wins, based on who they'll be facing more often than other teams. Okay, so that is something to consider when you're going into the season. There has been predictions that many people believe that Boston may end up being the number one seed in the East, like they were last year, and that could possibly be the case. So I think that's all going to be dependent on how often LeBron James rests, when Isaiah Thomas comes back in, and how they play without him. So there's a lot of things. Of course, they got to get used to their new rotation. Of course, we know that Tristan Thompson is not going to be in the starting lineup. But when it comes to Boston Celtics and the young team that they got, I do believe that they have a potential opportunity to probably, win the East as far as in terms of record. I think for them as a team, I think there may be more of a need to do that, knowing that if you're the Boston Celtics, you have to believe that you're not as talented and as deep as the Cleveland Cavaliers. So therefore, they have to go for that number one seed in order to give themselves some kind of an advantage in the event that they run into the Cavaliers in the playoffs. So, of course, we're going to start off with the new acquisition, which, of course, for this team is Kyrie Irving, Uncle Drew, who has basically left the Cleveland Cavaliers, wanted to be the alpha dog on the team, and here's his chance. Of course, we know they added Gordon Hayward. They drafted, a rookie. I think he may be probably the best rookie, but he's probably not going to win Rookie of the Year because he's going to be coming off the bench. He's not going to have the kind of minutes, and that is talking about Jason Tatum, okay, who may, over time of the course of the season, may end up coming into the starting lineup. So that's something to also look out for. Ultimately, to me, the way I feel about this team is, I think that it's going to all depend on how they all gel together in the system. I don't believe that they will be able to beat the Cavaliers in a 7-game series. I do have them as of right now. I still think that LeBron has something to prove. So I will say, aside from the fight that they'll probably try and have to get that number one seed, barring an injury to LeBron or, another key role player on top of him, I would say that they will finish number 2 in the East. And I think that they will go through a couple of growing pains. For one, I'll tell you one thing that they're missing. We know that they lost Avery Bradley. They also lost Jay Crowder, 2 of their top defenders on their team. So now you have a team which is more offensively minded. Nobody is considered a particular type of stopper, and I think that will eventually, hurt them in certain games where they'll be, pretty much being cooked by some of the other top perimeter players around the league. And I think that it will be a glaring weakness and problem that they will have problems on defense, and also I believe they'll also have some problems with rebounding as well. For one, Al Horford is not the rebounder he once was, and I think that this is a team that if they go up against a team that rebounds well, they'll lose the rebounding battle as well. So I think that they will struggle. I think their big strong point over the course of the season is to get as efficient as possible on offense and make it their best defense, at the end of the day. So that's how I look at it. I have them finishing probably as of right now, barring injury, at number 2 in the East. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next team in the Atlantic, which is the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets, as of right now, during the preseason, they look pretty good. But, I mean, everybody knows that preseason means nothing. Let's look at their team, for instance. Their team does not have one player on their roster that can make even an all-star team in the East. Okay? So I think that's all you need to know about where this team is probably going to end. In addition to that, they have draft picks that they've given out, including, I believe, the upcoming 2018 pick. I believe they gave that one. That was given to Boston. I believe Boston gave it to Cleveland. And I believe it's also unprotected as well. I expect this team to be in the bottom 3, probably in all the league. We know that they did acquire D'Angelo Russell from the Los Angeles Lakers, who they are very high on. They believe that he may be able to be an all-star level guard. He is young. He had some shows of he had some flashes last season, and maybe they feel like with him getting the ball consistently that he may be able to be the consistent scorer that they need to be the on their team. But for the most part, when you just look at this team, these are very good players. Don't get it wrong. Like, a lot of these guys are very good as role players, but as far as like leading a team, being on the starting lineup, and being able to make an impact against some of the top teams in the league, they're going to have problems. And if you just look at the team, it's just not going to work. So, I mean, that's pretty much all I got to say with them. I think that people should still be, wondering what in the world is going on in Brooklyn. And some of the moves that they made have been very questionable over the years. So we'll go ahead and go on to Toronto. Now, Toronto, as we do know, I believe finished the third, I want to say, last year in the East. We know that they're one of the better teams in the league, not just the Eastern Conference. They do have 2 bona fide all-stars in DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. They also have a guy who is almost a fringe all-star level player in Serge Ibaka, who's developed his 3-point shot very well. And I'd like, seeing a player, add to their repertoire more and more. He's always been a guy with a soft touch. He has stepped away from the basket more and more over the years, even though he is somewhat of a high flyer at the 4 spot. But he does stretch the floor, which is a much needed thing to allow Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan to do their thing. And their squad, for the most part, is fairly good. I like CJ Miles. I like a lot of these players. KJ McDaniel. I mean, they have some good players. They do have some very good players. I mean, definitely Jonas Valanciunas is an underrated player in the league, and I like the way he plays at that center spot. So their starting lineup, when you really look at it, is very strong. Their bench does have to get built up over the course of the season to see where they may be. But for the most part, I do have them probably finishing number 3 in the East. Probably competing for 3 or 4 in the East with the Washington Wizards. Those are pretty much the 2 teams that will probably be battling for that 3rd spot. And I think that they have the type of team that could, make for an exciting playoff series when the East comes. I don't think the East is as bad as everybody's making out to be. I think they're still somewhat top heavy. I think that each team might be missing, a couple of the teams may be missing, another all-star caliber player to be on the level of some of the teams of the West, which of course we'll get into as we go through the different divisions. But there is a massive arm race going on in the Western Conference that is not going on out East as much, which, is kind of weird, but, it is what it is. It's just the way it is in this NBA today. So we'll go on to the Sixers. Now, the 76ers, as you know, they've been talking about trusting the process, something that Joel Embiid has on his Instagram, on his Twitter. He consistently says it. We've known that they've basically been drafting number one picks since who knows how long. I mean, they've been drafting top picks, and even some of them they've been tucking away. If they had a slight injury, they basically didn't play them, let them sit out the whole year. Those two being most recently Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Of course, even before that, I want to say the same thing happened with Nerlens Noel. All right, so here's hoping that those that trust the process hope that Markelle Fultz does not get hurt and he has to sit out this season again. We also do know that they picked up Jahlil Okafor, who was upset upon being drafted, knowing that he was simply just an insurance policy for Joel Embiid and that he was going to be pretty much tucked at the end of the bench and be rendered useless after pretty much, being one of the top players in high school, one of the top players in the college basketball at Duke. I believe even leading them to a championship. And here it is at the end, he's tucked into a bench. There's been rumors that he's going to be traded, but he never is moved. So that's something that's going on. We do know as well they did pay a massive amount of money to J.J. Redick as they wanted to spread the floor with the shooter in hopes that they could do a little bit better. I like their team. I think that their team could be, a team that would remind you of that young Oklahoma City Thunder team that had all those good picks, and they just morphed into an all-star, unit where a lot of those guys became, all-star caliber players. When you go through their whole lineup, their draft picks are very well, and this could be the same thing. They may be Oklahoma City East, and we know that they signed Joel Embiid to a long-term deal, and which we already discussed with the last piece, if you already saw it, about Joel Embiid getting that bag. So I believe that Joel Embiid this season, because there are incentives in the contract for him, he is going to go all out. And I believe he's going to have a monster season, barring injury. I think he's going to have a monster season, from the defensive and offensive standpoint. And I believe as of right now, he should be considered not only the focal point of their offense, but really their true franchise player. Of course, we will see how Ben Simmons is as he goes on through. But right now, I mean, the players that I like on this team outside, what I really would be excited to see, and I think that if you're a Sixers fan or just a fan of basketball, you have to watch the 76ers and see how they develop throughout the season. Joel Embiid is going to be a monster this year. I don't know how Markelle Fultz is going to go because I don't know how he's going to fit considering that he's going to be at the two-guard spot. They're actually going to play Ben Simmons as the point guard of the team. So we'll see how he handles that particular role. Another good player that they have on this team, of course, is I like Dario Saric and I like Nick Stauskas as well. You got some shooters out there. You got J.J. Redick. So they'll be able to actually spread the floor with this lineup. I think it's just all going to come down to how these young players end up matching over the course of the season. And I think that they are one of the more exciting teams to watch this season. To see how they do. I think it'll be great to see them make the playoffs and play maybe against a Boston, like in the first round. I think that would be like a good test for them. I think if they go up against Cleveland, I mean, it'll be just extremely difficult, going up against that deep of a team with LeBron James still at the peak of his powers, even at going on 33 years old. I just think that it'll be a good match to calibrate them if they were to make the playoffs and they were to end up facing even a division rival in Boston Celtics to kind of see where they're at. So moving on to the last team in the division, the New York Knickerbockers. As we know, the trade happened. Melo ended up in Oklahoma City, and now they're basically saying that they're rolling with, Kristaps Porzingis as their franchise player, which, heck, ain't nothing wrong with that. I mean, he's pretty much, Dirk Nowitzki, with probably a better handle, he's a little bit taller too. So, that's a good thing. I think he's a guy that wants to be great. And I think whenever you have a player that works hard and wants to be great and is highly skilled, you can't go wrong with that. I mean, he's definitely a franchise player. And I think that they're going in the right direction by moving Melo out and allowing their young players to grow. They did sign Tim Hardaway Jr., and I think that he's going to try and prove himself that he could play at a high level as well. I like his drive. I mean, he just seems like a guy that really has something. He has a chip on his shoulder. He has something to prove. Even though he signed this deal, I don't think that the deal is going to stop him from trying to, get in his name, amongst the top players in the league, and he works very hard in the offseason. Michael Beasley, I mean, as much as he's had problems in the league, he cannot miss with his talent. I mean, the guy just can put buckets. He's a guy that can come off the bench immediately and score. And I think that's a good person to have. You have a veteran guard in Jarrett Jack who will keep them steady. Don't forget that they also in that trade received Enes Kanter, who's one of the top young big men, a double-double waiting to happen. And I think that that's going to be a good guy to play alongside of Kristaps Porzingis. They're going to complement each other very well, and it's going to allow Kristaps Porzingis to really play that stretch position and allow Enes Kanter to work his way down in the middle. Courtney Lee, a nice veteran. Joakim Noah, he's been hurt. I mean, I would say this, their team, I don't know how bad the bottom part of the Eastern Conference is going to be until we really see how they play. But they may be able to sneak into the playoffs. But I think that's going to all be dependent on if Kristaps Porzingis can put up, all-star numbers. What I mean by that is, like, if he could do what I think he's capable of, I believe that he's capable of putting up a 25-10 season this year. I think he has that ability to do that, and I think they're gonna make him, shoot towards that level of play. So I think if he's able to be a consistent guy, they're able to get consistency from their role players, they're able to get consistency from Tim Hardaway and some of the other guys. They do got a mix of, they got a couple of veterans here, a couple of guys that have played for big teams, and depending on how they play and depending on how they all mesh, they could end up sneaking in to the playoffs at the bottom of the East. So you just never know. I think they're still a team to watch. I think when people talk about the East, I think you have to really just look at some of these young players and, see how they play for this season. So this pretty much, wraps it up when it comes to the Atlantic Division. We'll be moving on to the next division coming up shortly.